fear them. Do not fear any of them.
Very, very good evening. Wednesday, the 3rd of September 2025. My name is Raj Amir, and this is it's the first of the new series. Series is a bit serious, I think, or a bit ostentatious. It's the new sequence of Recusant 9 transmissions. I've had a summer's break from the live videos, but those of you who follow my work will know that despite having the summer off from the live videos, we have been extremely busy over the summer, keeping the pressure on Jess Phillips, who I think is going to rue the day, if she hasn't already, rue the day she ever messed with any of us. Her career now is effectively over. Jess Phillips' career is effectively over, and she knows it as well as anyone else, and we will get to that, which is really what I want to focus on this evening. I came back today, and thank you Darcy for the super chat, and thank you Jane also for the super chat, and thank you to those of you joining. I came back today with a view of two reasons really. One is, it is officially our 7th year anniversary, and this is how I keep track on this phase of my life and this phase of this journey with many of you. It is 7 years ago. It is 7 years ago today I dropped my daughter off in school for her first day in school, and it's her first day back, so that's how I count the years. And it's been 7 years since I went to Warren Bates's house and picked up that carrier bag, and what a journey it's been. So we're 7 years in, and I wanted to come back a few days early just to get the 7 years sequencing right. And the other reason I wanted to come back tonight was it would hopefully be a little bit quieter, and I'll get back up to steam, make a few mistakes, makes no difference. It's and yeah, see how we get on and get back into the groove. And of course, the decision was really made for me yesterday when Jess Phillips stood in the chamber in Westminster in Parliament, and what I witnessed was absolutely unprecedented. Rian, missed you as well. Thank you so much for the super chat. Thank you so much. Right, before I get into things, on Sunday, this coming Sunday, I will go through all of the shenanigans we've had over the summer. I know many of you have been in touch with me, first of all to do with the silliness we've had with reform in Oldham. It's done with. As far as I'm concerned, it's done with, and people can swear at me, shout at me, lie about me. It makes no difference to me. I'm not the one standing for election. Hopefully the reform team in Oldham will now move on to bigger and better things very, very quickly. So that's all I care about there. So I'll quickly run through some of that. I know some of you have asked about that, and I'll also go through the issues we've had with Facebook. I am still locked up my account. I don't know if I'll get access back into my account. Facebook were meant to review whatever they did to throw me out within 24 hours or just over 24 hours. It's now been a week, and it's the same holding message. I've hired lawyers, so you're all aware. I've hired lawyers, and lawyers have written to Facebook. It's the importance, I think, of trying to promote Redwall and the Rabble, because it's a platform I own. It's my own newsletter, and if you subscribe to it, you're up to date. If we lose the Facebook page, it will be a blow. Of course, it'll be a blow, because the previous month we had 5 million interactions. 5 million interactions, and we'd got to over 30,000 followers. I think it's a combination of being hacked, and it's a coordinated campaign with some of the Islamists, and I don't know what else to do on that Darcy. I've got an intellectual property right lawyer onto it. Liz, she's called, and she's trying her best, and I'm not sure what else to do on that. I've reported it to the police, but we all know the police won't do anything because I'm an inconvenience for the police, aren't I? Once I'm gone, if I'm gone, once I'm gone, they think they can go back to normal as things were. So I'm an inconvenience for the police. So the police, they've tried to falsely put me in prison. I don't think they're going to come and support me in any way. So thank you so much, Eamon, sorry. Thank you so much. And I think we have them running scared, and we've done so much in such a little amount of time. And if you follow the sequence of what I put out, you should now be able to see it, and you can decide if I'm copying other people's work or any of that nonsense that's going on. Yes, up to you lot to decide. But I think you can see the sequence now of how I'm a campaigner, how we put content out, we nudge politicians, we pressurize one set of politicians, we give another set of politicians with the ammunition and the evidence, and we punch above our weight. And a small team of us, which now includes you, all of you, a small team of us have run rings round the government on this issue. And Jess Phillips is in a complete and utter mess, and it will only get worse for her. It will only get worse for her. So, when Jess Phillips first stood at the dispatch box, coming back from her summer recess, remember, I think she thought she was delivering a masterclass in political management. You've all seen her now. She marches in with a pre-prepared script and reads off it as fast as possible in this monotone voice. And am I allowed? She consistently looks scruffy. She promised no stone would be left unturned, no hiding place would remain for perpetrators, and there would be justice for every victim. The words rolled off her tongue with practiced authority. But we are not new to this, and we have learned to listen for the silences, the half-truths, the suggestions rather than the confirmations. And we've learned, hoy have we learned, that when it comes to the Labour Party, what their politicians refuse to say matters more than all of their empty promises combined. And Phillips's performance yesterday was a symphony of calculated omissions. Each silence revealed the boundaries Phillips and her rape gang protecting Labour Party have drawn around truth itself. And I'll play it for you. Sorry. Thank you so much, David. Good to see you here again as well. There are 3 omissions I want to draw your attention to first, and then I will play the video and we'll talk it through. And I'm afraid for those of you who are of the TikTok generation, Rajami isn't very good at the TikTok world. So this is going to be a detailed transmission. I've got my Vimto with me. I might need to stop and go and get another one. And what I'll promise to do is edit it afterwards and cut it off into segments for those of you who can't hang around. I didn't know Julie Hayward wasn't a member. Had you let it lapse, Julie, the YouTube membership? Thank you so much. And I've missed Julie as well. So hi, Julie. So, the first omission. Not once did Jess Phillips use the word Muslim. Not once. Think about that. In the exchange that took place at an hour and 20 minutes, I think in total, other MPs repeatedly used the term Muslim. They spoke bluntly about the institutional terror of offending Muslim communities. But Phillips treated that word like it would burn her tongue. This wasn't accidental forgetfulness. This was a political calculation at its most cynical. We now know, all of you now know. She knows exactly what she's doing. The Labour Party, and specifically politicians such as Phillips, have a reliance, blackmailed even, by the bloc Muslim vote. It's not just a dependency, is it? Who's in charge? Is it Phillips? Or is it the bloc Muslim vote that's in charge? Like so many Labour MPs, she represents areas where the Muslim vote decides elections. Cross that demographic, lose your seat. It's that brutal, that simple. Thank you, Kate. Then we talk about the survivors' testimonies. The Minister for Safeguarding Girls can't use the word Muslim when the survivors themselves have been saying Muslim. And Phillips's silence erases the voices of these survivors. These girls told us their rapes were religiously motivated. They described being called, you'll have to excuse me, dirty white slags who deserved abuse because they weren't Muslim. Every time Phillips swallows that word, she betrays their testimony all over again. And before anyone wants to get at me, even Maggie Oliver now is using the term Muslim. And if there was any ambiguity, the perpetrators, the men convicted in court, in their testimonies, they justified their actions as acceptable because of their religion. They weaponized Islam to justify their crimes. Whether that reflects their twisted theology or calculated manipulation doesn't matter. It happened. It was documented. It's proven. Pakistani men convicted of gang raping little white girls left the courtroom shouting Allahu Akbar. Yet Phillips would rather sanitize reality than speak the truth. She wouldn't use the word Muslim. The second word, of course, is Pakistani. And it's the controlled use of the term Pakistani by Phillips I want to draw your attention to. When Phillips finally used the word Pakistani, it was only used twice. Once to make reference to the overrepresentation, as identified by Baroness Casey, and another time, well, when I heard it, I'm thinking, did she just say that? Did she just claim that? Jess Phillips reframed Pakistanis as the truth seekers. She claimed the Pakistani part of her community were the most fervent truth seekers. The Pakistanis were the ones who were shouting and screaming for justice, if you believe Phillips. It was the Pakistanis who were dragged out of the houses, arrested. It was the Pakistanis who were marching up and down the streets What world have I been occupying? What spaces have you been occupying? Since when were the Pakistanis the whistleblowers, the campaigners, the ones who are the most fervent truth seekers? Brilliant. It's extraordinary that she even attempted it. And no one picked up on it. I read all the newspaper articles, the GB News, no one picked up on it. But she transforms the demographic, producing the disproportionate number of offenders into the champions of justice. She rewrites reality in real time. It's something extraordinary. She also admits the disproportionate offending rates of the Pakistanis and then dilutes it immediately. She acknowledges cases' findings about disproportionate Pakistani heritage involvement, then immediately pivots to bureaucracy, better data collection, administrative tweaks. Watch a moral crisis become a filing system problem before your eyes. What about the racial motivation? Well, that's a blind spot, isn't it? Phillips's performance becomes truly obscene here, and I use the word obscene. Survivors have told us repeatedly they were hunted because they were white. They were called white meat. Perpetrators claimed these children, these white children, were fair game because of their race. This is nothing other than racial targeting. It is textbook racial hatred. Yet Phillips doesn't talk about this. She heard this testimony. She knows these facts. Yet she cannot call this a racially motivated crime. She can't admit to the Pakistani element and the reasons behind the Pakistani element. Why? Because naming racial targeting of white girls by Pakistani men shatters too many comfortable narratives that the left rely on. She also let slip the predetermined inquiry boundaries. Her real agenda is revealed here. She's not launching an independent inquiry if she gets her way. She's managing one. There's a difference between launching an independent inquiry and managing one. And she's in the management game. That means where we can go and where we can't go. By talking about abstract, and I'll quote this, intersections with ethnicity, race and culture, end quotes, she has already decided what can be investigated. A real inquiry follows evidence wherever it leads. Yeah, a real inquiry follows the evidence wherever it leads. It examines cultural patterns, ideological influences, historical precedents, anything that might explain why this particular demographic is so catastrophically overrepresented in the rape gangs. You know my position on this. I've shared with you previously. Rape genocide is real. Pakistan's involvement in rape genocide is a matter of fact. Historical records confirm it was used in 1947 to ethnically cleanse areas of Pakistan of Hindus and Sikhs. They raped the women and chased them out. historical fact. The United Nations has documented how the Pakistani regime used racially motivated and religiously justified rape genocide of at least 200,000. The Bangladeshi estimates are 1 million. At least 200,000 Bangladeshi girls as young as 8, 9. In 1971, and that figure in the rape camps was over 9 months. These Pakistani war crimes are irrefutable. Yet Phillips is too scared to go here. Go where? Well, I'll ask you the question. Is rape a feature of Pakistani culture? Did these men bring to the United Kingdom a tradition of what they did to Hindus, Sikhs and Bangladeshi girls and women that they now decided they'd do with the new demographic that they could racially abuse and religiously legitimize their crimes? Did they? Surely a national inquiry should ask that question. They've admitted the overrepresentation. Baroness Casey has confirmed the overrepresentation. It's not a far-right bandwagon. So surely we look at the reasons why. Instead, Jess Phillips, the Minister for Safeguarding Girls, is pre-filtering acceptable conclusions. She's already decided what's appropriate to investigate before the inquiry even begins. That, my friends, is not independence. That's institutional control dressed up as justice. And the third omission? Do you know what it is? Anyone? The third omission Jess Phillips ignores the victims and that the victims are white working class girls. I'm not joking. She ignores or deflects away that the victims were white working class girls. I was rubbing my head. I'm thinking, what on earth have we done here? What have we been campaigning for 7 years? And what have we, in the line-up of many of you are new on this journey, have been witnessing for the last 7 months? Is this not to do with the Pakistani rape gangs? And the industrial scale gang rape of at least 100,000 working class white girls? So she can't demographically reflect the perpetrators or religiously. And it doesn't stop there. She can't even do it to the bloody victims. It was Phillips's most calculated lie, in my opinion. She claimed to have met victims who were black, white and Asian, and I quote that. The only time she uses white in that context is she makes reference to victims being black, white and Asian. She wanted to make it inclusive. It's not inclusive. It's erasure. She wanted to rewrite history, disguising the pattern. Every major case tells the same story. You've seen it on newspaper report after newspaper report. GB News after GB News, the rape gang inquiry. Rupert Lowe's team released something last week, 85 areas they've identified, and we know they're lower because there are other areas that immediately came on top. So I reckon there's 100 local authority areas comfortably. About a third of all local authority areas in England, in Britain. Every major case tells the same story. The overwhelming majority of grooming gang victims, rape gang victims, were white working class girls. They weren't black girls, they weren't Asian girls, they were white working class girls from towns the establishment had already written off. Jess Phillips knows this. She knows the data is undeniable. Yet she deliberately obscured this reality with diversity doublespeak. She was erasing the victim's profile. Why hide who these victims were? Because naming them means confronting why they were chosen. These weren't random selections. These girls were hunted because they were white, working class, and deemed disposable by everyone around them. A price worth paying to maintain community relations. And that is the racism Jess Phillips won't name. When survivors tell you that they were targeted for being white, that's racial selection. When they describe being called, I apologize again, white slags, that's racial hatred. Phillips's inclusive language doesn't just ignore this, it actively erases it. And where does that leave the victims, the survivors? They are denied justice not once, not twice, but at least 3 times. They were failed first by the predators who saw them as racially inferior prey. They were failed again by the institutions too cowardly to act. And now Phillips wants us to fail them a 3rd time by refusing to even accurately describe who they were and why they were targeted. Jess Phillips's word games aren't just politics. They are institutional gaslighting. Muslims erased completely, Pakistanis sanitized and rationed, white working class victims disappear into meaningless diversity statistics. The linguistic manipulation shapes official records, warps public understanding, and continues the same culture of denial that enabled these crimes in the first place. Jess Phillips yesterday wasn't ending the cover-up. She was perfecting it. What was once crude institutional denial has evolved into sophisticated truth management. Same lies, better packaging, same betrayal, greasier delivery. The victims Jess Phillips claims to champion deserve better than her managed truth. They deserve the whole truth, spoken without calculation or compromise, but we know Jess Phillips will never do that. Which is why this nation deserves politicians who can name the perpetrators, victims, and motivations without flinching. But this would require moral courage. The sort of moral courage that Jess Phillips, the Minister for Safeguarding Girls, who is too busy to come to Oldham and meet with survivors, clearly doesn't possess. So the betrayal continues, wrapped in the language of justice, delivered with the confidence of someone who thinks we are too stupid to notice. But we notice, we remember, and if we see this through, we will make sure that they will not be able to bury the truth like they have done with so many other national inquiries. Thank you, Denise. Let me play you the video.
Statement, group-based child sexual exploitation and abuse. Minister Jess Phillips.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I would like to update the House on the progress being made to deliver Baroness Casey's recommendations following her national audit on group-based child sexual exploitation and abuse, which was published before the summer recess. The sexual exploitation and abuse of children by grooming gangs are the most horrific and despicable crimes. Girls as young as 10 exploited, abused and brutally raped by gangs of men, and then disgracefully let down again and again by the authorities that were meant to protect them. These despicable crimes have caused the most unimaginable harm to victims and survivors throughout their lives and are a stain on our society.
Sorry, I just stopped that there because she introduces it as she means to go on. Did you hear her? Gangs of men. How dare she demonize all men? How dare she demonize all men? Gangs of men. These weren't gangs of men. These were specific types of men. Do you see that? Straight away with the introduction. It's as if everything we've done to get this inquiry to where it is has been erased by Jess Phillips. Roger, you're being too harsh. No. I'm simply analysing what she's saying. She'll start crying. And you can see her coming close to tears as this goes on. And starts, being upset at people online and stuff. But you can see it there. Gangs of men. It's not me, it's her. I'll play it again from the start. Listen.
Statement, group-based child sexual exploitation and abuse. Minister Jess Phillips.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I would like to update the House on the progress being made to deliver Baroness Casey's recommendations following her national audit on group-based child sexual exploitation and abuse, which was published before the summer recess. The sexual exploitation and abuse of children by grooming gangs are the most horrific and despicable crimes. Girls as young as 10 exploited, abused and brutally raped by gangs of men, and then disgracefully let down again and again by the authorities that were meant to protect them. These despicable crimes have caused the most unimaginable harm to victims and survivors throughout their lives and are a stain on our society. Madam Deputy Speaker, Baroness Casey's report chronicled more than a decade of inaction on these appalling crimes by previous governments, despite repeated warnings and recommendations. But this government will not lose any more time in pursuing truth and justice for victims and survivors, who deserve so much better. That's why, on the 16th of June, the Home Secretary made abundantly clear that this government would accept all of the 12 of Baroness Casey's recommendations, including the establishment of a new statutory national inquiry into group-based child sexual exploitation and a new national policing operation to get more perpetrators behind bars. Since then, we have made significant strides in laying the foundations for a robust, survivor-centred national inquiry and establishing a national policing inquiry, while continuing to drive forward the major work streams that were already well underway to tackle these abhorrent crimes. I will first update the House on the progress made to establish a new national policing operation to get perpetrators who exploit, abuse and harm children behind bars where they belong. Today I can announce that Operation Beacon Port has been established. It will be overseen by the National Crime Agency and delivered in partnership with policing, including the National Police Chiefs Council and the CSE Task Force and the Tackling Organised Exploitation Programme. For the very first time, this new national policing operation is bringing together all of the relevant policing partners under one operation to ensure a swift and specialist law enforcement response to grooming gang offending. This collaborative approach is ensuring that long-term investigative capability built across police and best practice is standard, ending an unacceptable postcode lottery for victims and survivors. This new national operation will eliminate inconsistencies on how cases are handled across forces and ensure that there is no hiding place for perpetrators. Victims and survivors are central to this operation, and a trauma-informed practice will be at its core. I have been meeting over the summer with survivors and their support organisations on this issue. This work is already well underway. In January, the Home Secretary asked police forces to identify cases involving grooming and child exploitation that had been closed with no further action, to pursue lines of inquiry and reopen investigations where appropriate. As a result of that commission, 1,273 cases have now been identified for formal review, and with the new national operation has identified 216 highest priority cases that are those involving an allegation of rape, which are being accelerated as a matter of urgency. We expect policing to meticulously pore over these cases and work with associated victims to relentlessly pursue perpetrators who should be behind bars. That includes the ongoing investigation relating to South Yorkshire Police's handling of reports into child sexual abuse and exploitation in Rotherham. Following discussions between the Independent Office for Police Conduct, South Yorkshire Police and the National Crime Agency, I can confirm it has been formally agreed that the investigation will now be carried out by the NCA under the direction and control of the IOPC. Alongside
So what she's admitting to there is there's 1,273 cases that they know of so far. Of 216 of these are the highest priority. Well, what are the others? Were they not raped, or were they not gang raped? What's the criteria? She doesn't say. Where are the locations? She doesn't say. She talks about policing best practice and actually deciding that there needs to be a consistent approach across the country to how you respond to children being raped. This is outrageous. These aren't the actions of a liberal Western democracy, a sophisticated nation such as ours. It's an admittance of severe policing failures. And she wraps it up by making reference to what happened in Rotherham. And we've been campaigning over the summer, and we've succeeded in some part, but not as much as I'd like to have. So what happened in Rotherham, so you all know, is even the BBC ended up reporting that police officers were raping children in the backs of cars. And for over 10 years, or give or take 10 years, the IOPC and South Yorkshire Police were investigating each other and investigating themselves, and nothing had happened. And once the story broke, Phillips and her lot were like, yeah, the IOPC and South Yorkshire Police will continue. And we said, no, the National Crime Agency needs to take this over. The National Crime Agency needs to take it over. And they've said, yes, the National Crime Agency can take it over, but the investigation, they'll do what the IOPC tells them to do. Since when was it the job of the IOPC, which investigates police complaints, not police operations? Since when was it the job of the IOPC to investigate and direct where the National Crime Agency goes? It's just another cover-up. It's a continuation of the cover-up, and they need to cover this up because the evidence is compelling. Police officers were involved in the gang rape of children. They even used police cars to rape children.
These ongoing reviews, Operation Beaconport will also provide additional support for police forces to conduct complex investigations and to ensure that specialist best practice is being adopted consistently across the country. I want to thank the CSE Task Force for the work they have done in preparing the way forward for these investigations. And I can announce to the House today that in the first year of this government, that we were in office from July 2024 to 2025, the task force contributed 827 arrests nationwide, an 11% increase on the previous year.
How dare she? How dare she just say that? 827 arrests. Aren't we proud of ourselves? 827 arrests. An increase of 11% on the previous year. I don't care how many arrests were made. I want to know how many people were then subsequently charged, Jess Phillips. I want to know how many were then convicted. What happened? Did you arrest them? Did cousin Abdul, who controls 500 votes, phoned the police station and his nephew or his uncle got removed and let go? Because that's the pattern of what we're seeing here. So saying 827 arrests when we know, one, that the gang rape is of an industrial scale, 100,000 plus, 827 is absolutely insignificant in number. And what's worse is you know and I know, Jess Phillips, that because you omit how many people were charged and how many people were subsequently convicted, that the numbers are completely insignificant. And that's why you don't share that data, isn't it, Minister?
Whilst of this vital work, I also want to update the House that last month I announced that the government will be injecting 426,000 of new funding to the Tackling Organised Exploitation programme, which is additional to the 8.8 million we are already investing in the programme this year. The new funding will enable TOEX to extend access to a suite of its cutting-edge investigative apps and digital tools stored within its secure capabilities environment to all police forces in England and Wales. In addition to the 15 police forces which are already utilising TOEX tools, following my announcement of a further investment, a future 10 forces are currently onboarding. The TOEX
Okay, I don't know what TOEX is. It sounds like some sort of AI system. Yeah? It's by the by. It's got nothing to do with the inquiry per se. And she's announcing this is how desperate they are. She's announcing £426,000. Honestly, take my word for it, this is pennies. I've never heard of a government minister who's standing up to fight the rape gangs and the industrial scale abuse of children across the nation for decades saying we're investing £426,000 into a computer system. For fuck's sake. It's outrageous. We're investing 426,000. 15 police forces already use it. Another 10 can. Okay, We'll be maybe onboarding 25, there's 44 police forces, I think. So just over half. It's desperation. It's utter desperation.
Expansion crucially supports the first phase of Operation Beaconport. Police officers will be able to access the AI-enabled tools to assist with detecting and investigating child sexual abuse and exploitation. This includes TOEX Translate, a tool for bulk translation of foreign language text from seized mobile devices, and has enabled savings of an estimated 25 million so far. And the data analysis and review tool, which analyses large amounts of digital data to identify communications patterns and relationships between suspects. Further announcements on Operation Beaconport will be made by operational partners shortly. A comprehensive update is expected in the coming weeks, setting out the full scope of the operation and the support available to those affected. Madam Deputy Speaker, we will never shy away from the facts in these cases, and so following Baroness Casey's audit, her conclusions on the disproportionate role of Pakistani heritage gangs, and building on the work of the Home Secretary had already commissioned to improve ethnicity data in relation to these crimes, we have also committed to making it a requirement to collect ethnicity and nationality data of suspects who commit child sexual exploitation and abuse offences. The Home Secretary has written to Chief Constables to signal that the current data collection across ethnicity and nationality is unacceptable and that this data must be improved as a matter of urgency. Work is now underway looking to amend the annual data requirement to support this process, and we are also looking at legislative options to drive forward these improvements.
We are looking for legislative. They want to, that means the police are refusing to do their job. So the government are looking to make it a legal requirement to collect ethnicity and nationality data. We are now looking to, they wouldn't now be looking to do this if the police were already doing this, and of course it's not enough. Why are they collecting ethnicity and nationality data and not religion? Surely they need to also collect the data on religion.
Finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, Baroness Casey recommended the establishment of a new statutory national inquiry that could compel targeted investigations in local areas to get to truth and justice for victims and survivors, and to drive meaningful change in local systems and structures that had failed so many people in the past. I can confirm that the national inquiry into group-based child sexual exploitation and abuse will place victims and survivors firmly at its heart. It will crucially ensure trauma-informed, accessible engagement for victims and survivors that reflects diverse lived experiences and minimises the risk of re-traumatisation. The inquiry will examine how effectively local and national safeguarding systems protected children from group-based sexual exploitation and abuse, and hold institutions accountable for past failures. As the Home Secretary said in June, its purpose must be to challenge what Baroness Casey's audit described as continued denial, resistance and legal wrangling amongst local agencies.
You heard it from her yourself. Hold effective blah 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 on systems, hold institutions. No, it's not enough. She is trying to frame the parameters of a national inquiry that will exclude investigating those that specifically failed and the reasons as to why they failed, including politicians. And she's trying to exclude, definitely trying to exclude, the perpetrators and their motivations. Because if she was including that in the national inquiry, that would be specifically referenced at this point, and she doesn't. We want to look at why there is an overrepresentation of Pakistani men, what the drivers are, and how we can respond to that as a government, and what the punishment should be. Nothing there. Absolutely nothing there. She wants to make it an abstract desktop paper exercise where we then just feel sorry for survivors who go and give testimony and are traumatized. No. It's disgraceful. This is absolutely disgraceful.
The inquiry will consider intersections with ethnicity, race and culture and assess the safeguarding duties of public services, identifying both faith.
Intersections of ethnicity, race and culture. What about religion? What about religion? If there is an intersection of race, ethnicity, culture, religion has got to be another factor in that intersection. There's got to be another theme. Why has the government intentionally omitted religion? And look at Angela Eagle behind her. Look how nervous she is behind her. They know what they're trying to do here.
And examples of good practice. I know that everyone in the House and beyond wants to see the inquiry begin its work at the earliest opportunity. Colleagues will know that this requires the appointment of a chair and the agreement of terms of reference. Following a recruitment process over the summer, Home Office officials, the Home Secretary and I have met with prospective candidates for the chair of the inquiry, and we are now in the final stages of that appointment process. Most importantly, the chair must have credibility and experience to command the confidence of victims and survivors as well as the wider public, and meaningful engagement with victims and survivors is paramount. To support this, a dedicated panel of victims and survivors has been established which will contribute to that chair's selection process. This is a critical milestone, and once an appointment is confirmed, the House will be updated at the earliest opportunity. Members across the House will understand that this process must be done properly and thoroughly, and that we must avoid a repeat of what happened with the efforts to appoint a chair of the original independent inquiry into child sexual abuse, when 3 chairs were appointed and subsequently withdrew from July 2014 onwards prior to the eventual appointment of Professor Alexis Jay in 2016, a full 2 years after the original chair was named. We are determined to ensure that does not happen again. In line with the Inquiries Act, the appointed chair will play a central role in shaping the Commission's terms of reference. These will be published and subject to consultation with stakeholders, including victims and survivors.
The chair will play a central role in determining the terms of reference. Not the chair will determine the terms of reference. A central role. So who else will play a role, Jess Phillips? Will it be you? Will it be the other Labour Party politicians who are neck deep in the cover-up of the industrial scale gang rape of children? Who voted time and time again to prevent a national inquiry? Will it be the politicians who mobilised the police against whistleblowers? Look over here, look over there, but whatever you do, don't look at me. Who are the stakeholders? I think they are, I'm afraid, sadly, my belief is they are nothing other than malleable survivors and their family members. It's the malleable. It's the ones who can be manipulated. You've seen the body language. They don't want to be there, do they? The ones behind, you can see arms crossed, head down.
The inquiry is expected to run for 2 to 3 years, enabling it to examine a broad range of issues while honouring Baroness Casey's recommendation that it must be time limited to deliver answers swiftly, which has been a key request not just from victims and survivors, but also members across the House. The inquiry will begin identifying priority areas for review, conducting targeted local investigations, and reporting findings at both local and national levels. These reviews will be tailored to the specific context of each area and may involve a wide range of organisations, including children and family services, police, the CPS, and health and education providers, youth services, third sector organisations, and central government departments whose actions and decisions have affected what has happened at a local level. Where appropriate, the inquiry will issue recommendations at both a local and national level, and we will keep the House informed of all appointments and the terms of reference, as with the victims and publics, as soon as possible. The Government remains unwavering in its commitment to ensure that this inquiry is robust, transparent and capable of delivering truth, accountability and meaningful change. As we have said from the outset, we are determined to ensure that every survivor of grooming gangs gets the support and justice they deserve, that every perpetrator is put behind bars, and that every case, historic or current, has been properly investigated, and that every person or institution who looked the other way is held accountable, as that is a stain on our society and it should finally be removed for good. I commend this statement to the House.
Before I call the Shadow Home Secretary, given that the Minister's just taken 12 minutes, I will be extending the time allowed to both Shadows to 6 and 3. Chris Philp.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Minister for advance sight of her statement. Let us remember that victims are at the heart of this. Young girls, some only 10 years old, were groomed and gang raped by men of predominantly Pakistani origin. Girls like Jane, just 12 years old, when she was raped by an illegal immigrant, when she was found by police, instead of arresting the rapist, the police arrested Jane. Or Anna, only 15 years old, who repeatedly told social workers that she had been gang raped. Instead of helping her, they allowed her to marry her main abuser in an Islamic ceremony. The social worker even attended the ceremony. The ringleader of the Rochdale rape gang, Shabir Ahmed, was actually employed as a welfare rights officer by Oldham Council. In another case, a man tried to rescue his young daughter from being raped, but instead of protecting her, the police arrested her dad. I spoke to a mother whose daughter was raped by taxi drivers of Pakistani origin. When she complained to social services, they said that if she dared to raise the matter again, she would lose her daughter. And I spoke to a retired police officer who was himself told by a senior officer at the time to stop investigating abuse by Pakistani origin taxi drivers in Bradford because the police locally did not want to offend Bradford's Muslim community. A former Labour MP, Simon Danchuk, was even told by senior Labour Party figures to stop asking questions in his constituency to avoid antagonising the Muslim community. So these crimes were deliberately covered up by people in authority because so-called community relations were seen as more important than protecting young girls. Madam Deputy Speaker, this is a disgrace. Now, the Minister claimed in her statement a moment ago that nothing had been done about this previously, and I don't want to dwell on this, but I will gently remind her that it was the last government that set up the original Rotherham inquiry in 2014, set up the long-running ICSA inquiry, which was much broader but did touch on this, started to collect data on the ethnicity of suspects, set up Operation Soteria to combat sex crimes, and I attended many meetings on that, set up the Grooming Gang Task Force that led to 550 arrests in its first year. I'm glad that's continuing, and introduced legislation to require mandatory reporting. And again, I'm glad the government is continuing that work. It is clear, however, that much more is needed. But this government has had to be dragged kicking and screaming every step of the way. When the government's rejection of Oldham's call for a national inquiry became public on January the 6th, the Prime Minister disgracefully smeared as, quotes, far right those supporting calls for that proper inquiry. That kind of language is how these crimes got covered up in the first place. Now, 10 days later, the government partially U-turned and announced local inquiries. And then, on the 16th of June, faced with a parliamentary vote 2 days later, the government finally announced a statutory national inquiry. Not because they chose to, not because they wanted to, but because they were forced to. What the Prime Minister claimed was a far-right bandwagon in January had become government policy by June. And here we are, Madam Deputy Speaker, 3 months later. Almost no progress has been made. My office has been in contact with survivors in Oldham today, and they have heard nothing. Now we discover no chair has been appointed, there are no terms of reference, there is no news on towns like Oldham or Bradford, nothing of substance at all. This is just not good enough. So will the Minister tell the House precisely when a chair will be appointed and when we will have terms of reference, a precise date? Will this inquiry have full statutory powers under the 2005 Act? Will she confirm all 50 towns affected will be covered? Will she confirm that no police force or council will be able to investigate themselves? And will she confirm, perhaps most importantly, that this inquiry will look at those in authority, police, CPS, local councils, who deliberately covered this up because those people were more interested in appeasing certain minority communities than they were in protecting young girls? And finally, does she agree with me that those individuals responsible for deliberately covering this up should be prosecuted for misconduct in public office, and if they are convicted, sent to jail?
Minister.
I thank partially the Shadow Home Secretary for his tone. I'd just like to correct the record. I didn't say that he had done nothing. What I said, that Baroness Casey had said that there had been a decade of inaction of these appalling crimes by previous governments, was exactly what I said. I also answered in my statement many of the questions that he has asked. What I will not do, and his office may have spoken to some of the Oldham victims today. I spoke to some of them personally last night, and so I keep in touch with lots of victims. And what I will not do, what I will never do, is make it so that they are not involved. And it takes time to make sure that this process is completely victim-centred. And I will, frankly, what I will say to him, and I am sure that this is what he and others on his side have written to me about.
I want to swear at her now. She's hiding behind the victims and trying to pretend that she's now taking the side of the victims. Look at the look on her face. And what she's, trying to talk down. You're asked 6 specific questions, Minister for Safeguarding Little Girls. Terms of reference, clear date. Will all 50 local authorities, so all the areas, be investigated? Can she confirm that no police force and no council will be involved in investigating themselves? Will they look at those in positions of authority who failed them? And misconduct in public office for those involved in the cover-up. She doesn't want to answer those questions. She is totally fake, George. You're right. She is totally fake.
Requesting will want to see that too. And that is the process that we are undertaking. in answer to his question, no local authority area can turn it down. I have said, and the Home Secretary has said a number of times, it is a full, powerful, statutory inquiry. And I have to say, I have seen some scaremongering, and victims have written to me to say, oh, this won't cover government officials, it won't cover people who covered things up. Absolute nonsense. Let me say and be very clear, and it be taken away by everybody who I'm sure has the victim's best interests at heart, that it will cover what it needs to cover to uncover the truth. And no stone will be left unturned. And that will make difficult conversations for people. And if people are found by our court system to have undermined and had disgrace in public office, then of course they should be sent to prison. However, that has never happened to date in these cases. And so, of course, I very much hope that we uncover the kind of social workers that he referred to, and I hope that they face the full force of everything that they deserve to face.
Doesn't want to face the politicians, though, do you, Jess Phillips? And you can see what she's done there. And this is what campaigning is. For those of you who say, Raja, you're too confrontational, you're too this, you're too that. My job isn't to be nice to these people. My job is to lobby, is to nudge the likes of the Conservative opposition, is to put information out into the public domain like we have been doing. Much of Chris Phelps's references were to Oldham and was to content that we'd released. You've been here. You've seen me share the information to do with the matter in Bradford, to do with the social worker attending the wedding. You've been on that journey with me. Shabir Ahmed only got confirmed as a consequence of what we did. The police officer he made reference to was John from Oldham that we pushed forward to Charlie Peters. You know what we're doing here. I'm speaking regularly with survivors myself and telling them what I think Jess Phillips is up to. They're giving me information as well. And she's got angry, she's got agitated, and there's no script in front of her. And now that there's no script in front of her, those words we will then keep and we will use and weaponize against her and her kind when they attempt the cover-up that we know they're all going to attempt. And you're right, Alex. You're 100% right. We do have every concern to be questioning and suspicious of their practices and motives. Let's have a little bit more, I think, if it's okay with you.
But there is absolutely nothing that says that anybody can avoid this. It will be up to the inquiry, which is independent and statutory, to look and work with areas about where this will be.
Debbie Abraham.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
So this is Debbie Abrahams, and I want to say it again here for those of you who are new on this journey with me, the 2,766 of you who are on my screen right now. Debbie Abrahams is the MP for Oldham East and Saddleworth. Debbie Abrahams falsified evidence in an attempt to have me maliciously prosecuted for, I think it was under the Misrepresentation of People's Act. She lied. She doctored her social media posts that I'd put out. And when I clarified those social media posts, my lawyers did in the interview room with the police, were the evidence that she had kindly provided the police, had deleted posts that I'd responded with to give a misrepresentation of what the actual exchange was. The police officer's face went bright red and he couldn't wait to escort me out of the police station. He even walked me to my car. And when I complained against Debbie Abrahams that she has fabricated evidence and what she'd done was a criminal offence, do you know what the police said to me? Oh, everyone does that. So Debbie Abrahams is neck deep in the cover-up of the grooming and gang rape of little white girls in my town. Little girls were dragged from the gates of schools in her constituency into cars and driven away by Pakistani men to be gang raped. And Debbie Abrahams has not stood up in Parliament and campaigned for these children. Instead, what you will know her for is standing up in Parliament and campaigning for Kashmir. That's right, Kashmir.
Can I thank my honourable friend for her statement. No one doubts her absolute commitment and her team's commitment to address the root causes of the abuse and exploitation that so many women and some boys as well have experienced. In my contact with women this morning, they're absolutely, I'm speaking on their behalf, absolutely committed and understand and reflect that commitment of my honourable friend. But they are keen to know a bit more detail about when the chair can be appointed, the relationship that the National Inquiry will have with the local ones. You quite rightly said that the appointment of the chair should have victims and survivors engaged and involved in that, which is so important. But can you say a little, can my honourable friend say more about how we're going to ensure there's locality-specific representation as well, because there are slight differences according to locality. Thank you. Minister.
There absolutely are, and the honourable lady is, my honourable friend is exactly right, there is different, and so it will be for the chair and a panel and a commission to be doing that work in localities and ensuring that that victim engagement is really location specific. With regard to the specific issue of Oldham, obviously we have been engaging very closely with Oldham for some time, including obviously with victims and survivors. I was speaking to some, as I say, last night about wanting them to be part of the terms of reference for the national inquiry, and our offer for a full local independent inquiry in Oldham remains in place, and we are in discussion with them about how they want to proceed in context of the national. What we don't want to do is have victims having to do a repetitive exercise, actually, but I can assure her that we are speaking to officials in Oldham very regularly.
What that is an admittance that the Oldham inquiry that was set up parallel has collapsed. That is an admittance that the Oldham inquiry that involved Tom Crowther, that was set up in parallel, has collapsed because the Oldham inquiry attempted to move forward without statutory powers. And what Jess Phillips is admitting to there is saying, no, we don't want the survivors to have to do things twice, blah, blah, blah. That means the inquiry that was underway in Oldham has collapsed. Yes. Pressure. It is always about pressure. Campaigning is always about pressure, keeping the pressure on and being relentless and having faith that we can be the difference, and we are the difference, and we have always been the difference. So that's what's gone on there. If you are finding value, and thank you, John, for that super chat. If you are finding value in my work, I'm currently banned off Facebook, and it will hurt us. I'll be clear with you, it will hurt us. 5 million views a month we will lose because of what's gone on, and probably about at least a quarter of my income. So if you are finding value and you're new to me, please subscribe to Red Wall and the Rabble. They can't take that down. They can't take that away from us. This is the link. And honestly, the offer is as simple as this. Ask anyone here. Everything I produce is shared 100% for free. No paywalls, nothing like that. All I ask people is if you can afford to do so, then please support me. And then it's the equivalent of 75 pence a week, or you can pay £30 a year. You can pay more if you want to. Most people don't, and it's fine. But the Facebook ban has hurt us, and it's damaged our reach significantly. There are many people who use Facebook, who perhaps come onto YouTube, but they don't use X. I only really use Facebook and X historically in terms of social media. And it's the older demographic. It's the community-focused demographic, not the politically aware ones who are in the main on Facebook. And I don't think what's happened on Facebook is accidental. Thank you, Gary, for the super chat. Gary was around earlier this morning. I was chatting with him and looking at something for him. And I was smiling because when he left, I looked to my right and there was a pile of ironing still waiting to be done. I'd been away with my daughter, and whilst I don't need to iron my clothes, she has expectations. You sent me a super chat and I missed it. My apologies. Let me find it. If I've missed it, sorry so much. Thank you. There you go. Sorry, my screen's to one side and the monitor I look at and everything's in front of me. So sometimes if I miss things, it's not intentional. Yeah, Substack is good, Chloe. Yeah, but we're, 500,000 views we've lost, Chloe. And I think Substack a month is something like 10,000 views, which is still a lot, but it's just, nothing in comparison. Yeah, that's exactly what's happened, mate.
Democrat spokesperson Lisa Smart.
Very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'm grateful, as I always am, to the Minister for advance sight of her statement. In every single conversation about this issue in this House, our first thought must always be with the victims and the survivors. No child should ever suffer the devastating trauma of sexual exploitation or abuse. These crimes are abhorrent and an assault on the very values of our society. We carry a responsibility to act, to secure justice for victims, to ensure offenders answer for their crimes, and to build a future where such suffering is not repeated. In 2022, Professor Alexis Jay published her independent inquiry into child sexual abuse. And in June, Baroness Casey released her report on group-based exploitation. I am really grateful to the Minister for her update on progress that's being made, but would like to ask when she expects to have implemented the crucial recommendations from both reports. Baroness Casey was clear in one of her key recommendations. The government must end the practice of out-of-area taxis by introducing stronger national standards for taxi licensing and driver regulation. Across Greater Manchester, we know this problem all too well, and for years drivers have exploited the fragmented system by obtaining the easiest licences from councils in one area and then operating elsewhere. As a result, many taxis working in Greater Manchester are licensed 100 miles away in Wolverhampton. Could the Minister let us know about the work she's doing to address this specific issue? It feels like there's an opportunity this afternoon, Madam Deputy Speaker, through the English Devolution and Community Empowerment Bill, but the opportunity has not yet been taken. Will the Minister work with colleagues across the House if an amendment to the bill is the way to achieve this, to ensure that this important recommendation from Baroness Casey can be delivered. And finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, this is something I and others have raised repeatedly, and on which some progress was hinted at in recent press reports. Could the Minister confirm when Parliament will see legislation for a Hillsborough law, as promised many times by the Government, to guarantee that public officials and authorities cooperate fully with a duty of candour in cases such as this, including the upcoming national inquiry?
I thank the Honourable Lady, and to pick up on some of the things that she asked, really specifically on, and I am meeting with the Department for Transport on this very, very issue last week, and it is about just looking for a legislative vehicle. The Government has said that it will undo some, I have to say, the harm done by the deregulation legislation of the past with regard to the dangers that have come about in safeguarding and taxi licensing, and it is a legislative vehicle, and she invited members to work across the House. And what I would say in every interaction since the last time I stood here, or the Home Secretary stood here doing a statement, in every interaction I've had with victims of this crime, which has been many, many in that time, what they asked is, could we just please work together and stop throwing mud at each other? So I stand here and say I will happily work with anyone on this issue. Looking for legislative vehicles is currently where we are, but we will do seek to legislate. And again, sorry that this is not a very prescriptive answer, but shortly is when we will be expecting the Hillsborough law, but it is very much expected.
So the Hillsborough law is for the duty for politicians to tell the truth when giving testimony. Is right. It's crazy, isn't it? It's absolutely crazy. You've got to pass legislation that puts a duty on public officials and politicians to tell the truth. That's what this country's come to. The taxi stuff in Greater Manchester, as we know, and to do with Wolverhampton, actually it's a fudge. They can go and get the licenses elsewhere and stuff, but it's not that. It's the fact that, you know, the enhanced DBS checks aren't done properly or checked properly. It's not a thorough enough process, but even then, there should be mandatory CCTV cameras in all taxis. There should be mandatory CCTV in all taxis. If anything, for the safety of the taxi drivers. I heard a story today from one of my contacts that a taxi driver in Oldham with convictions, definitely arrests, for domestic violence, battering his wife, is doing taxi runs, school runs, school contracts. I got a phone call over the summer from a local councillor who informed me that there was an attempt at a recent licensing, taxi licensing meeting to support someone with convictions for sex abuse to get a license. That the fact that this person even put in an application just demonstrates what took place and what is still taking place. I don't blame her, George. And I said this as with many friends of mine, family members. My brother-in-law drives a taxi. It's in the interest of taxi drivers to have stronger safeguarding measures put in place around who obtains licenses. And it's also in the interest of taxi drivers as well to make sure that they are safe whilst driving their taxis. I've had friends of mine who are taxi drivers who were badly beaten up. Many years ago. I remember a taxi driver I knew. He was killed, murdered. It's in the interests of taxi drivers to have CCTV, I think. How difficult a conversation is that? Why are we not legislating it?
Charlotte Nichols. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The last government failed to implement a single recommendation from the ICSA report, and Professor Alexis Jay herself spoke of the huge anger and disappointment at their response. While Baroness Casey's work rightly focuses on the future, and I'm grateful for the statement today, can the Minister please reassure me that the extraordinary work of Professor Jay and all of the brave victims and survivors who contributed will not be forgotten?
Sorry, I don't want to talk about the ICSA report, really.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Over the summer, Lord Cryer said that there was a deliberate attempt to silence his mother, Anne Cryer, when she first bravely raised the issue of grooming gangs in Keighley more than 20 years ago. Anne Cryer was, of course, my predecessor in being the Member of Parliament for Keighley. He said he was, and I quote, absolutely certain there has been a cover-up at a local level and that Bradford needs to be examined as part of this inquiry. Unfortunately, Bradford Council and others in this House are still saying that they will only support a focus on Bradford if deemed necessary by the inquiry chair. That is not the same thing, Madam Deputy Speaker, as saying that they will actively be lobbying for this outcome. So does the Minister share my concern that Bradford Council's reluctance for an inquiry in our area hasn't changed, despite the many voices of so many victims and others demanding one?
Minister.
I thank the honourable gentleman, and I pay absolute tribute to Anne Cryer, a woman I am incredibly fond of personally as well as professionally, for her immense bravery, and I absolutely...
Absolute bullshit. The Labour Party demonised Anne Cryer as a racist. The Labour Party demonised Anne Cryer and hounded her out as a racist. I'm not, like, these people are rewriting history all the time. Is that not true? Have I made that up? They demonised her as a racist. And now Jess Phillips is talking about how she's a huge admirer. Bollocks.
I have no doubt that none of us would be sitting here talking about any of this today had it not been for her, and so she deserves absolute credit. I have to say I do not recognise the characterisation that he is making. I have not had any particular pushback or anywhere suggesting that the inquiry shouldn't be looking into certain areas or making any sense that they will be resistant of it. But what I would say to all local areas is resistance is futile.
Paul Wall.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I welcome today's update on the National Inquiry into Grooming Gangs, particularly the way that the Minister has made sure that victims and survivors are definitely going to be at the heart of whatever happens. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, during the trial earlier this year of 7 members of a Rochdale grooming gang, it emerged in court that actually the social workers involved had referred to one of those victims as a prostitute. She was 13 at the time. There were other victims who were 10 at the time who were also called prostitutes. I know the Minister will agree with me that the criminalisation of young girls as prostitutes causes them further trauma later in life. These girls were victims and the state should recognise them as that. So can I ask her what steps she'll take to ensure that such convictions for prostitution are disregarded as swiftly as possible?
I thank the honourable gentleman, and often in this debate we discuss how people felt nervous or anxious about the ethnicity, when actually what is also very evident in every single case, regardless of the ethnicity of the perpetrators, is the ability of agencies to look at women and think of them as something else, young girls, and think of them as poor, and to treat them poorly, and that is exactly what he is talking about. We will legislate to introduce, we are already in the Crime and Policing Bill, which is...
Poor. Did you see? She had the opportunity right there to make reference to these girls being deemed as prostitutes because they were white, working class and underclass, and the fake liberal, the metropolitan elite prejudices towards a white working class demographic that they would never hold towards Asian girls or black girls. She had a chance there, and she couldn't even do it there. She couldn't even do it there. And I think the prostitute label, and it's outrageous, it's disgraceful. It's an easy win, isn't it? If you arrested or if you convicted or charged any of these, not only do you offer an apology, not only do you wipe the record clean, but you owe them compensation. Because what you did was wrong. And the people who did that, the specific people who did that, need to be arrested and prosecuted. Surely the police officer who turned up to a house to find a 10-year-old girl with half a dozen Pakistani men and then arrested the girl as a prostitute, that police officer needs to be arrested and charged. The paper trail, if these girls were then convicted as prostitutes, the paper trail will clearly name the police officer.
Going to disregard any child prostitution convictions, and we are working with the Ministry of Justice to find a wider cohort of victims and work with CJS bodies to identify and review cases and support victims it won't always have been just prostitution charges. And in meeting with victims, I've met many who've been criminalised by a variety of things that they probably shouldn't have, and so that will be a much more complicated process, but one that we set in train.
Mark Pritchard.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm glad the Minister, and I hope the whole House will join the Minister in wanting to put victims and survivors first. It's absolutely right that we all do that. She'll be aware of the Tom Crowther inquiry that highlighted 1,000 victims over 30 years in Telford and in some parts of my constituency. As she earlier said to the House, we don't want victims to have to undergo, quote, a repetitive exercise, and I understand why she says that. However, would she support the national inquiry going back to Telford to ensure that things that still have not been done that should have been done will be done, and she'll ensure that the Labour Council there, forgive me, in Telford Wrekin, will not stand in the way of that progress?
Minister.
I thank the honourable gentleman, and just to say, on the contrary, there is very few people who have written to me more than the leader of Telford Council throughout this process to talk about how they want to continue to make progress. What I would say is that I am very familiar with what happened in Telford, and quite a lot of the evidence from Telford shows how people in Telford were groomed where I live in Birmingham, and yet, whilst brilliant, the Telford inquiry then didn't lead to any changes in neighbouring areas, and that is exactly what we will hope that the national inquiry will do. So whilst I cannot direct where it must go, I would absolutely be wanting them to look at prior work that has been done and some of the gaps identified, just exactly as he says.
Of course, what happened in Telford is even the Spectator magazine ran an article, I think it was titled Labour's Dirty Men or Labour's Dirty Secret, and Sean Davis, the MP for Telford, was named as the Spectator. They named him as someone who stood up and tried to defend the indefensible in Parliament when he was neck deep in the cover-up in Telford and had actively sought to prevent an inquiry. Sean Davis has not been suspended from the Labour Party. He has not been sacked, and no one really puts any pressure on him. Because if they went after Sean Davis, the dominoes would fall one after another, and they'd have to keep going after more and more Labour Party MPs who are sat in Parliament right now, at least in part, because of the part they played in helping cover up the industrial scale gang rape of little white girls in their town by Labour Party voting, block vote controlling Pakistani men.
Clive Efford.
Deputy Speaker, I welcome my honourable friend's statement today. This is yet another example of where the state turned its back on working class people, in this case young children, young girls. I welcome also the fact that the cold cases are going to be investigated, and that those cases will be reopened if there's any evidence of criminal activity. But we've seen in the past that when the police have been undertaking investigation and then there's an inquiry announced, that they suspend their investigations until the outcome of that inquiry. Can she give us an assurance that that won't happen in this case?
Minister.
Yes, the honourable gentleman makes a very important point, that we have to make sure that the inquiry isn't used for further state inactivity, and there have been cases of those things that have happened before. Because we are undertaking a new national policing operation in Operation Beacon Port at the same time as the national inquiry, what I will give him today is my absolute assurances that I will make sure that those are working closely together so that that cannot happen unless it is something that would cause such judicial issues that it would have to.
Liz Saville-Roberts.
And I truly thank the Minister for putting vulnerable girls first and central in her statement. And as we all know, victims of sexual abuse are too often disbelieved by the authorities, whatever the circumstances, and speaking out takes immense courage, and people pay an immense cost only too often. So while welcoming her announcements regarding the national inquiry, can she assure me that the government's delayed violence against women and girls strategy will clarify how victims will be supported to rebuild their lives? And could she please say when it will be published?
The violence against women and girls strategy, and there has been some reporting that it would not include child abuse victims and grooming gang victims, which I would like to stand here and say is utter rubbish, and it absolutely will, and it will be published very shortly. But I would say to the honourable lady that any delay is only out of my own perfectionism, I think is probably what I'm going to call it, in that this is something that will last at least to the next Parliament, and is a 10-year strategy and has to be right, but it will absolutely have huge parts of it that are about the support for victims.
Andrew Peggs.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank my right honourable friend for her statement, but also the care and determination she's brought to this role, not just to centre this discussion and action around the victims and young girls, but also to work in collaboration with others, not just in this House, but who are directly affected. Can I just add a question to echo points made by another honourable friend around loopholes in taxi licensing? One of the biggest issues that comes up in my constituency, both from taxi users and women's groups, but also from the vast majority of decent, hard-working taxi drivers, is that these loopholes and the ineffectiveness and outdated nature of taxi licensing actually gives a bad name to the system as a whole. Can I urge her to work with her colleagues and ensure, as we proceed with the national inquiry, we also proceed with this updating of legislation to give protection to all?
Absolutely. Long before Baroness Casey was pointing out the safeguarding issues, I was being lobbied by really decent, hard-working people around the failures of the taxi licensing system as it currently stands. And we absolutely will consider all options. And as I've said, we have committed to legislating really specifically on this point. But we are looking also at including out-of-area working, national standards and enforcement, and consulting on making local transport authorities responsible for the licensing.
Esther McVeigh.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, what a disappointment I came here to the House today to listen to the Minister's statement in the hope that we would get some detailed information about the government's statutory inquiry. And what have we had today? A long statement and very little information indeed. In fact, I would go as far as to say what this government is doing about this rape gang inquiry is a masterclass in procrastination. And what did we hear from the Prime Minister? It was a right-wing bandwagon. What did we hear from senior ministers? It was a wolf whistle issue. Well, what we want to know are the terms of reference, and where will they be put on the government's website so we can all inspect them? And when will this conclude? Or does the Minister hope that it will go on and on and on past the next general election?
Not sure that the Honourable...
Esther McVeigh is, of course, a Bernardo's child, I think, if I'm accurate, even though she's, so she's got guts. She's also on the Rupert Lowe's rape gang inquiry team, so I like her. I like her. So she's give it some answer, and Jess Phillips won't like it because also she can't hide behind misogyny when women like Esther stand up and challenge her.
Lady wants to hear my hopes about the next general election. I think, as I said earlier, the victims of this crime have sat in front of me with tears in their eyes and said they hate it when we shout at each other about these things and they wish we would work together. So just to tell her again the details of what I outlined was that 1,273 cases have now been identified by the new policing investigation, which was actually recommendation 1 of Baroness Casey. And of those, we are expediting 216 cases. So, and what I will tell her about the terms of reference is that they will be published and consulted on. And I have to say, I would very much welcome her opinion, and she's never asked for a meeting with me, and I'd love to have one if she'd like to be involved in how we build those up. Please get in touch with my office. But what I would say is that I have to say, hers is not the voice I'm most concerned about sharing them with, and those people I'm speaking to.
Chris Murray.
Thank you,
If you followed my work, and perhaps it's a contentious viewpoint, but it is my viewpoint on this. I have met with survivors now since the beginning of this journey. And the overwhelming number of survivors I've met with are damaged. Are hurt, clearly. It's not a reflection or a criticism of them. And pressurizing them and putting them in positions to understand complex, this is complex, details of terms of references and influences is outrageous. These people are hiding behind the survivors. They are manipulating the survivors and they are using the survivors, and she did it again. Oh, they don't like it when we argue with each other. No, the survivors I've spoken with, I've campaigned alongside, have been fighting to get this far. And they do not trust Jess Phillips and the Labour Party government. No. You need to call it out. We need to call it out. The survivors are campaigning alongside us. They are not agreeing with the government. Where do you think I get a lot of my information from?
Deputy Speaker, one of the most shocking indictments in Baroness Casey's evidence at the Home Affairs Committee was the long list of inquiries and speeches and the shocking lack of action that had followed from them. So I welcome this announcements the Home Secretary's made in her statement about action on tackling these issues. And can I ask what about something in particular? Can she update us on the establishment of the Child Protection Agency, how that will be set up as this inquiry goes on, and how it will adjust and evolve as learnings from the inquiry have come out?
I thank the honourable gentleman, and he is absolutely right, because Baroness Casey pointed out how much of her recommendations hinge on there being a good child protection authority, and that work is being done by Department for Education colleagues. I have been involved in it along with Alexis J, ensuring that she has been in meetings with them. But what it will do is evolve. Because what we don't want to do is wait forever to set it up, contrary to the views of some people in this House, and then or try and get it exactly right first time when it is a complicated thing. So it will evolve along the way, but all of those involved in the inquiry, I'm sure, will have, across both local and national bodies, will have the opportunity to feed into what that needs to look like.
Richard Ford.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'm wholly supportive of this government-commissioned report into group-based child sexual exploitation. But the government must not be distracted from places where child sexual abuse occurs most frequently. The NSPCC reports that 90% of young people who have been sexually abused said the perpetrator was someone they knew. Around a third is perpetrated by young people under the age of 18. And the NSPCC says that in relation to sibling sexual abuse, that, quote, the number of children affected by this hidden harm is far greater than is acknowledged by policy makers. Is the Minister certain that the government will not be distracted from abuse within schools and within families?
I absolutely praise the honourable gentleman for saying what he has said, because quite a lot of victims of familial abuse, or in fact child exploitation, not by groups, but child exploitation by families, which I'm afraid to say is not uncommon, or by peer groups is not uncommon, and I know that from my years of experience, feel as if their voices are being marginalised. What I would say is that this piece...
Absolute bullshit. Apparently, by us focusing on the cover-up of the Pakistani rape gangs, we're taking away and marginalising all the other children who are being groomed, who are being abused in family settings, in peer settings. Absolute bullshit. A government can do all of those things at the same time. Our focus has been on this issue because of the cover-up and the racial nature of the cover-up, and the way in which politicians were actively involved in facilitating and benefiting from what took place. This is different from the equally horrific abuse that children suffer in families or peer groups. I'm not here to justify or legitimise one over the other. I hate all of it. But the specialism I have on this, and why I've chosen to focus on this, is because of the specific nature of the cover-up. A few months ago, they were calling this far-right lies, a far-right bandwagon, remember? A few months ago, we were far-right racists. When we first started this, his name's Sean Fielding, the prick. Labour Party leader at the time, now he's a councillor in Bolton. Stood up and called it barefaced lies. This government was denying the Pakistani rape gangs as a phenomenon. And now we've forced them to accept it's real. And bollocks. Stop talking nonsense, Phillips. And whoever your mate was. Ooh, victims of rape in family settings are coming to us for saying we're going to be overlooked now because of the grooming gangs. Bullshit. No children is coming forward and saying that. Bullshit.
The work that we have announced today sits as part of a much broader child abuse body that sits within the Home Office and works on all of those things. The ICSA recommendations keep us on that track, but we must not lose sight of all of the abuse, especially that happening amongst young people against other young people and online.
Katrina Murray.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Minister for her statement today, and also the recognition that a process which is supported by those people who should be at the very heart of it is always a difficult one to do, and for any inquiry to have the faith of the people who are at the centre is something we try and take time to get right, because that will never be able to be done again, because they have been failed too often. We have discussed before how child abuse and exploitation does not stop at Gretna. And I would just like the Minister to outline what engagement there has been with the devolved administrations as to how we can make this a truly...
She's really an MP, oh my God, but the question she asks is really interesting. She wants to know if Scotland's included. Listen to what the Minister says. Scotland is a part of Great Britain. The rape gang inquiry in our 85 areas include a number of Scottish towns and cities. Either survivors have come forward or the local authority freedom of information requests have also confirmed the existence of these rape gangs. So she stood up and asked, is Scotland included?
National inquiry.
Minister.
I thank the Honourable Lady, and she is absolutely right. There is likely to be border crossing, as I spoke about, between Birmingham and Telford, which is a border in their inquiry. We continue to discuss this with the devolved administration. However, the Scottish Government can set up under the Inquiries Act, as we have, a specific national inquiry, but where there are any findings with regard to cross-border, that those of course will be shared and actions sought and potentially recommendations made.
Okay, so the national inquiry will not cover Scotland. That's what she's just said, confirmed. The national inquiry will not cover Scotland.
Julian Smith.
At the start of the summer, there were some horrendous reports about the rapes and assaults that are taking place by South Yorkshire Police. I welcome the decision to involve the NCA and strip away responsibility for those investigations from the force. But would she confirm that the National Inquiry will look at the role of the police, not only in cover-ups, but in the crimes themselves?
Wow.
Absolutely, yeah. The South Yorkshire Police should never have been left to investigate themselves in this matter, and so yes, moving over to the NCA is the absolutely right thing to do. But I would be lying if I said that over the years I have not met girls who talk to me about how police were part of the perpetration, not just the cover-up. And
so Jess Phillips, the Minister for Safeguarding Girls, has just admitted in Parliament that she was aware of the testimonies of children that they were raped by police officers. Why is that not headline news? Jess Phillips has just admitted that she was aware of the testimony of survivors that they were raped by police officers who were members of the grooming gangs. And despite this knowledge, she campaigned against a national inquiry. For those of you coming new to me, my name is Raja Mia. 7 years today. This phase of my life started 7 years ago today. During that time, this is what I do. Meticulously go through everything line by line, campaign, lobby, push. The authorities in this country spent over 3 years making up evidence and attempting to put me in prison. I know many of you follow Tommy Robinson. He's got an event in a couple of weeks, hasn't he? And he's been put in prison. The difference with me is each time I pled not guilty. And I fought and I fought and I fought. And sometimes, if I'm honest with you, it would have been probably easier for me to have pled guilty. But we are where we are. And now we've got an admission from the Minister for Safeguarding Girls that she has heard the first-hand testimony, and clearly testimony that she believes of survivors of the rape gangs whose abusers included police officers. Surely then, Jess Phillips the government must list the police forces involved. Surely. Have a look at her face. This is a woman who knows. She knows what's really happened. She knows what her role is. And she is in a complete and utter mess.
We need to make sure that victims can come and give that testimony. That testimony is harder to give than others because it brings fear and a lack of trust. But absolutely, that will, if that is where the inquiry takes us, because that's what victims say, then absolutely that will be the case.
Before I call the next speaker on the government side, I just wanted to make it clear I'll be going to Steve Darling after that. Catherine Atkinson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The crime of group-based child sexual exploitation is probably the most heinous imaginable. And it is so brave for victims to speak out and seek justice and drive change so that other young lives are protected from crimes like these. Can the Minister tell us more about how the National Inquiry will engage with victims and survivors and make sure that their voices and those who previously bravely contributed to investigations and inquiries are central to the recommendations? And unlike the criminal law, the criminal injuries compensation scheme does not recognise that children cannot legally consent and excludes those who have been deemed to consent in fact from compensation. So will she work with the Victims Minister to right that injustice?
I thank the Honourable Lady, and I absolutely commit to working with the Victims Minister. And the issue of consent, actually, and the age of consent was a huge part of Baroness Casey's review. And a number of honourable members have mentioned making this a victim-centred thing. That is words that we say. It is much, much harder in reality. These are people who have been very badly wronged, and their level of trust. It is not something that happens easily. It's not something where every one of the victims will get on with each other. And making sure that there are systems in both the national policing inquiry and also the national statutory inquiry to make sure that as many voices can be heard as comfortably as possible is absolutely what we will do. But I don't think we should lie to the public about how easy those things are. As somebody who has worked in this field for a very, very long time, we are talking about very traumatised and distrusting people, and it is going to take considerably more effort and patience than I think they've been shown in the past.
So Jess Phillips there agrees with me on the state of mind and the reality of the spaces and the places that these survivors are in. So if that's the case, why is she hiding behind them and talking about terms of reference and all the rest of it being informed and shaped by them? No. Contradiction after contradiction in all of this. And in terms of the age of consent, we know what the age of consent is. And we know a 14-year-old might have fought the 30-year-old man and his 6 cousins, his brother and his uncle. And he was somehow her boyfriend. But that's a child, and a child's opinion doesn't count in that setting, because we as adults have the responsibility to make that decision. And a 14-year-old, a 13-year-old, a 12-year-old cannot consent to sex with a 40-year-old man or a 50-year-old man. This is not Iraq. And if there's any ambiguity in the law, and there actually isn't, but if there's any ambiguity in the law, then that loophole needs to be closed. But it's just excuses. Honestly, it's just excuses. Thank you, Callum. I don't know if I'm celebrating Callum, but yeah, thank you so much. I think they're hoping to damage limitation. Yes, Katie, agreed. We've not got long left. I hope you're all okay. And you're still okay with me. It's the first one back. I told you, you know, this is what I do. This is how I do it. I'm afraid I'm not a TikTok person. I can chop this up afterwards. But what I do is thorough and detailed. And if it's any consolation to you, the hour and 5 minutes that this extract is, I've listened to it, I think 3 times since yesterday.
Steve Darling.
Thank you. Grooming gangs are absolutely abhorrent, as are all forms of grooming leading to sexual exploitation. This summer, I met with a Torbay resident whose 15-year-old adopted son had been groomed online and then prostituted online. Can the Minister please advise us how she is looking to tackle all...
So this is an attempt to deflect. They've got this thing about online grooming and they need to deflect, and I ain't got an issue with online grooming in sense of go after them, do whatever you need to do. But we're not having this national inquiry because of 15-year-old boys being online groomed by men elsewhere, are we? It's wrong. Of course it's wrong. But that's not what this is about. Because the institutions then did not protect those men. Because of racial optics, religious anxieties, or political conveniences. So if you don't mind, I'll move on. I think it's Barry Gardner who's actually in there rather than on a BBC, on GB News thing.
Barry Gardner.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. First of all, can I pay tribute to my honourable friend for what has been her lifetime's work protecting women and girls. I welcome her statement about updating the ethnicity data. This will enable the public debate to take place on the basis of data and fact rather than prejudice and scaremongering that she spoke of. But does she think it might also help to engender trust in the debate if she were to take this opportunity to acknowledge that there was a completely unacceptable woke reluctance to offend certain communities, and this culture of deference, where it still persists, must be stamped out?
I absolutely take the opportunity and thank the honourable gentleman for his kind words. I absolutely take the opportunity because I've seen it with my own eyes in cases that I have been involved in where people have said, oh, it might cause trouble. And that wasn't stopping them from doing it. But
So the next admission from the Minister for Safeguarding Girls, she's seen it with her own eyes. And of course the own eyes is the sensitivities around the racial dynamics. She can't bring herself to say it in that specific term, but there you go. She's had testimony from survivors who were gang raped by police officers, and now she's seen it with her own eyes where professionals involved avoided proceeding with cases because of racial sensitivities or cultural sensitivities. And this is a woman who denied Oldham a national inquiry and stood up and tried to pass these five local inquiries that were completely toothless. It's crazy, isn't it? The admittance that's coming out of her is absolutely... And, well, again, where's the newspaper reports on this?
Even mentioning that to me, which they wouldn't do in other circumstances. So what we have to do, and what we all owe to the victims of these crimes, is to call it what it is, but also not use our own political agendas over their very, very delicate and harmed lives in whatever form that is, because what we don't want is backlash now leading to police still feeling like, oh gosh, this is going to open a can of worms. We have to all act completely responsibly on these issues. But I've definitely seen it, and it should never have been allowed to happen.
John Lemon.
I've definitely seen it, and it should never have been allowed to happen. And I've definitely seen it, but I won't tell you exactly what it is I've seen. Something else, isn't it? Absolutely something else.
Thank you very much. I recently met with Dr. Joanna Kerr, an extremely brave survivor of child sexual exploitation and abuse in Scotland. But as it stands, the national inquiry won't cover Scotland, and the SNP government won't launch their own. So I ask the Minister again, will she commit to extend the national inquiry to include Scotland and all parts of the United Kingdom, or do victims like Joanna don't deserve justice?
Minister.
It's absolutely not that victims like Joanna don't deserve justice. They absolutely do deserve justice, and I don't know her case, and I'm more than happy to meet with Joanna and talk to her about her case. It is that the body who has to have a national inquiry into Scotland is that of the devolved government. It is both policing and child protection are devolved issues. However, as I've said to my honourable friend, on this side of the House, I am more than happy to look at, and certainly where people have been abused in Scotland, who are Scottish or live in Scotland now and have been abused, where the inquiry covers, they will absolutely be able to take part in that.
Lawrence Turner.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. One of the questions that haunts Baroness Casey's audit is why? Why was this type of offending allowed to grow seemingly unchecked for so long? So will the Minister, who it is good to see in her place, give an assurance that serious and credible research will be commissioned and operate without fear or favour into all the factors that drove and enabled the horrendous crime of gang-based child sexual exploitation?
Absolutely. One of the recommendations that Baroness Casey recommended was a piece of research into exactly that, the why things got covered up, the why on communities but also institutions, and the Home Office is currently working with various academics to commission that particular piece of research. But that is the fundamental, and whilst a huge amount, and as I've said I agree with it, has been about the ethnicity on the why issue, the nervousness, the wokeness, whatever you want to call it. One of the real whys is also about class and these young women and the way that they are treated by systems when they come forward, and frankly how lots of women get treated when they come forward about any of these issues.
Sammy Wilson.
Class and these young women, not ethnicity and class. We've always talked about working class. We've always talked about the class prejudice of the middle class, the metropolitan elite that occupy many of the positions of power. But even then, Jess Phillips couldn't bring herself to say white working class. Because the failure, there's two sides at least to the failure, isn't there? Of what happened to them. One is the institutions that were meant to protect them. And she's acknowledged the class dynamic in terms of the prejudice. But she won't look at why they were targeted. And they were targeted because they were white, because these were racially motivated, religiously justified crimes. And I'll keep saying this, and I'll keep saying this, and I'll keep saying this until you and I hear the government ministers repeating these words like they've repeated so many of our terms and phrases now.
Speaker, it's a pity that the government has had to be dragged screaming into granting this inquiry into Pakistani rape and grooming gangs. But the inquiry is welcome. However, given the fact that nobody has been appointed yet, terms of reference have not been determined, and we don't even know how long the inquiry is going to take, I'm sure the Minister will understand why victims will be looking to see what can be done immediately to address the concerns they have. And could I ask the Minister, for those cases that have been identified, where officials, police officials, social workers, council officials have been identified as covering up, can we be assured that their cases will go ahead of any inquiry? And for those who have been put in jail, can we ensure that they serve out their sentences and not like the Oxford Six who released early despite the recommendations?
The honourable gentleman, I did actually say in my statement that, like as it outlines in Baroness Casey's review, that it should take around 2 to 3 years. It should be time sensitive. And look, all I can say to the honourable gentleman is that to make sure that we are doing this right, I have said we will shortly update on the chair, and I would gently remind him of the 2 years it took to find a chair of the Child Sex Abuse Inquiry. 2 years and 3 failed attempts. I do not want to do that to people this time, and so that is why we are taking the time.
Tamanjeet Singh Desi.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. We all want to see an end to grooming gangs and justice for victims and survivors, because exploiting the most vulnerable is about as despicable and heinous as it gets. We all know that perpetrators come from different backgrounds and communities, but certain politically motivated individuals are trying to blame just particular communities, and that is why they try to gloss over that fact in their effort to sow division.
He's calling us racists. Yeah, he's calling us racists. Of course, this Sikh MP is reliant, where he is also on a substantial Muslim Pakistani bloc vote. So he needs to, you know, make sure the samosas are available to him when he goes back home. But he's calling us racist. Politically motivated, apparently we are. Can't help themselves, can they? Can't help themselves. It actually gets worse with the last person, which I want you to listen to after this one.
Discord. We certainly can't be politically correct about this either, because no one, regardless of race or religion, is above the law. But we cannot allow such an important issue to be treated like a sectarian political football for those who seek to sow that division. So can my right honourable friend, the Minister, outline what the government will be doing to root out this evil with this second national inquiry, and how this will remain focused on victims and survivors, and how will she ensure that this debate is conducted in a sensible, sensitive manner?
I can only, what I can say is that I stand here as a vessel of those, as I have said, the victims who've spoken to me, who, in his words, that they haven't necessarily used the word sectarian, but that they hate this being used as a political football. Baroness Casey, in the media that she did post releasing her report, said the same, that she felt that politics was not meeting the moment in some of the responses. We have got to do better, and the very first thing that I would say is that I welcome the involvement and I look forward to the engagement around the terms of reference, which will be published for consultation with every single member of this House, regardless of what they might have said before or what we might have fallen out on other occasions. I welcome it, and I want to make sure that we show the very, very best of this place, because that is the least they deserve.
Bob Blackman.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Minister will be well aware that many of the victims of this disgraceful, despicable type of activity were originally taken from broken homes, taken to the care of a local authority, and then groomed ruthlessly. Social workers turned a blind eye. Managers told social workers to turn a blind eye. The police, in many ways, were complicit. One of the problems is that whistleblowers, of course, that came forward to tell the stories about this, were all sacked. So what action will the Minister take to ensure that the victims are protected, but the whistleblowers that come forward and tell the truth of what was going on are similarly protected as part of this inquiry?
I absolutely agree with him. Not a man I've fallen out with before, but I absolutely agree with him, and making sure, in fact, I heard from some whistleblowers this week around how some of their testimony was not then published in the ICSA inquiry. So we have to really look at, when dealing with the terms of reference, the very robust safeguards on whistleblowers. I have worked with one of the whistleblowers who lost her job, Sarah Robotham, in Rochdale, and I have met with her and her Member of Parliament to talk about exactly some of that and how we need to, not just in the inquiry or in Operation Beacon Port, just try and get this right in the future.
Charlie Dewhurst.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. On the 6th of August, the Minister described certain councils who do not believe they have a problem with grooming gangs as idiots. Can she therefore explain if this also applies to the government, given the enormous pressure it took for them to implement this inquiry and the disparaging comments previously made by the Prime Minister?
It would be playing a very long game to say that I'd been taken kicking or screaming into this issue, because on Sarah Rowbotham, one of the whistleblowers, I wrote a book about her about 9 years ago and this particular issue, and set up many support services for victims of these crimes. What I will stand here and say is that I will always do what I think is best in these cases. And I took the advice of Baroness Casey, and I think that trying to see bad faith in it or score political points on it is not what we should do.
Oh, here we go again.
Mohammed.
Thank you, Madam
This is the one.
Speaker. I would like to pay tribute to the Minister for the work and thank her for her statement. Madam Deputy Speaker, this crime is absolutely abhorrent. Every single victim and survivor of this crime must get justice, no matter who the perpetrator, Pakistani, Indian, English or anyone. So please, can we dial down the politicisation and the inflammatory rhetoric in this place and show total compassion and empathy when we work together to tackle this scourge in our country for every single victim. And finally, may I ask the Minister for a meeting with me and my colleagues so we can learn how we can support the work of the government in this space.
So that Mohammed is a pro-Gaza MP elected off the back of the Pakistani sectarians and Islamists, and he wants to dial down the politicization, and he's happy to throw in other races where it says Pakistani, Indian or anyone. Well, sorry, Mr. Mohammed. Overwhelmingly Pakistani, almost exclusively Muslim. Deal with it. What Phillips does now, what Jess Phillips, by the way, this is where we're finishing on this, what Jess Phillips does now is remarkable. Never seen anything like it.
Of course, I will meet with the honourable gentleman and like I say, any colleagues who wish to take part in this work. As somebody who represents a large and diverse community myself, I have to say that it would be the Pakistani part of my community who have been most fervent in wanting the truth to come out, because there is harm to them that has been done by the the alleged wokeness that has been talked about. And I take this opportunity as well as I finish this statement to say that we not just have to make sure that we have the facts and not feel squeamish about the perpetrators, but I want to say that I have met victims of this crime, in fact, on 6 a.m. on Monday morning, victims of this crime who are black, white, Asian, and we mustn't be silencing those victims by only ever talking about one type of victim. The victimhood in group-based abuse is not just one type. Apart from one thing, they were all girls.
They have it right at the end. Pakistani part of her community were the ones who wanted the justice the most. And then what the common denominator in the victims wasn't their ethnicity, it was their gender. Absolute bullshit continuation. I hope you found value in what I do. I'll be honest with you, I was, part of me was looking forward to coming back, and part of me was also thinking I've enjoyed not being here, if I'm honest. We are doing okay in terms of numbers. When I said doing okay, we've not really lost much over August. Just a very small, steady incline. We're just at over 6,000 subscribers on Redwall and the Rabble. The target was always 10,000. We've been stalled around 5,000 to 6,000 for a few months now. So if you can and you haven't done so yet, please, please, please do subscribe to redwallandtherabble.co.uk. It'll take you 10 seconds to do that. It'll take you no more than 10 seconds to do that. It's completely free. You only pay if you want to do. All of my work is completely free. And if you are new here and you can afford to do so, I am 100% community funded. There's been a whole host of smears by me, by people who hate me, despise me. I've been at this for 7 years now. Came into this from a lifetime of community service, public service. And I can only carry on with your kind generosity. It's as simple as that. No one pays me, and I'm not sponsored by anyone. So if you can, please, the vast majority of people who support me, it's only a couple of pounds a month, £3 a month, or the occasional coffee using one of these links. And even if you can't afford that, it doesn't matter. Subscribe to Redwall and the Rabble. My name is Raja Mia. This was a Recusant 9 transmission. Thank you very, very much. Good to be back.
Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them. On the 20th of November 2003, James Ignatius O'Rourke McMahon was elected councillor for the Failsworth East Ward of Oldham. Deeply ambitious, he ruthlessly rose to power, and by 2011 he was already leader of the council. In 2015, exploiting a Labour Party loophole, he became MP for Oldham West and Royton. If only the people of the town knew then what they now know. Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them.